So in this month's skill refresh, we're talking about values. And I think that it's always helpful to go back and review values. Sometimes they become familiar, or sometimes we get in a rut in only using them in one particular way. So I wanted to remind you all of the importance of values, what they actually are, and then also give you a few ideas for how you might use them in a fresh and new way with your clientele. Number one, values are different, right, from ethics and from morals, but all three of those things help us in our decision making. So as coaches, one thing that we want to be just really aware of is that our role in our job is always about new learning and new habit creation. So insight and action and accountability around that action, right? So when our clients come to us, often they come because they're lacking clarity in a particular area and they want to move forward in that, whether that's gaining self-awareness or really achieving some big goals for themselves. There's something that's blocking them from doing that on their own. And a lot of times it's the decision making and resistance around making a decision. My coach used to say, what you resist persists, but face what you fear and watch it disappear. So one thing that we can do is assess, like, where is resistance continuing to come up for our clients, and what might that have to say about their values and how they're honoring them, and even if they're facing what they fear around that. Morals are just what a society has determined is morally right and wrong. Ethics are a particular code of conduct that a profession or group of people has agreed to operate by to ensure the public's trust. But values, as you know, are very individualized and unique and personal. So when it comes to decision making, it's not difficult to make decisions based on morals. It's not difficult to make decisions based on ethics, typically, because we know what the right decision is, or we know what the ethically sound decision is most of the time. It's when those things butt up against our personal values that we have some difficulty. So you all as LSCCs have learned how to identify experiential values. One thing that our LSCCs continually ask for are the questions that we use in the demo in Foundations to mine for those values. So we'll be providing those for you in this month's collab subscription. So you can kind of walk through that yourself and add your own as you choose to add your own. So hopefully that'll make mining for experiential values a little bit easier, more accessible for you to have the list of the questions that we use in that demo. The other thing, though, is that you can identify core values without making them experiential. So as LSCCs, we know that experience-assisted coaching is highly effective. One of the reasons that is because when you are engaged in wanting to learn something new, it takes about 400 repetitions. Normally, it would take about 400 repetitions to create a new neural synapse in your brain. But when you're engaged in play, which doesn't necessarily have to mean toys, but some sort of experience that urges you toward joy is how we would define play. Some sort of experience that urges you toward joy. When you're engaged in play for the sake of new learning, you can actually create a new neural synapse with only 12 repetitions, which is just crazy, right? So that's why we go through the whole process of mining for values as an experience, or as something that you're experiencing that's urging you on toward joy. When we mine for them that way, then it only takes these 12 repetitions, right, to create the new synapse, rather than 400 repetitions of like, what's my value? How do I honor the value? What's my value? How do I honor the value? But another way of doing that is any way that you can introduce an experience into the process of mining for values. So one option for that is something called a values card sort, which one of our LSCCs, Rachel Passerini, has developed a unique values card sort for LSCCs. You can also just do a Google search for values card sorts, and many options can come up for that. You can use the points of view pictures to do values card sort, or strengths cards. There are lots of different options, but basically you create you have a whole list of values, and maybe those are on pictures, maybe those are on cards, maybe those are on little pieces of paper that you've cut out. And you ask the client perhaps to bring in a playlist of their top 3 to 5 favorite songs that urge them toward joy. And then you can actually create 3 columns on a table, or even on I've done this on a shared Google Doc before, so that I can type in and the client can type in at the same time. But you create a column that's most important, somewhat important, and not important at all. And then the client gets to decide which values go into those columns. So I might put beauty as most important, efficiency as somewhat important, and it's really hard to put stuff in the not important at all column, and consistency in the not important column for me personally, as far as my core values go. Now, somebody else might put consistency in most important, right? Beauty and not important, and efficiency in somewhat important. And that's fine, because what happens then is we just become more aware, these are my values, and how do I creatively create? Like, how do I creatively and courageously co-create in the world based in a unique way that honors these values? So the card sort with a playlist is a great way to also dig for values. Another way is if you have your client do a reflective journaling piece, or even if you ask them to fill out your discovery questions. If you print those off ahead of time and you look for the client's values in their writing or in their homework assignments, you can kind of highlight the values that you see pop out. Share that with them. Say, here are some values that I saw in your discovery session, and ask them if that name works for them, right? Because naming something is incredibly important. We'll talk about this probably over and over again, but naming something, naming your value is incredibly important. If it doesn't have a name, then it can just drift around out here, and we just become confused and lack even more clarity in how to honor it. But as soon as you give it a name, you're able to create both memory and agency around it, which means the client can remember, here are all the times that I honored the value of beauty and efficiency in my life. Here are all the times that I didn't. Here's when I first named it that in this coaching session with my coach. It also gives them agency in that they're able to then choose around it, which is what they came to you for in the first place. So if we're operating from the assumption that everyone is ready to live at choice, then we can kind of say, okay, let's name this value. We believe you're ready to live at choice around it, and they can ably choose how to best honor it in their life moving forward. So you'll be getting a few new resources around values this month, but wanted to be sure that we refreshed and gave you some ideas for how to use it in session 2. Make sure that you are also honoring your values as a coach in your practice. If that means that you need to refresh some things or rework some things, then do it. But yeah, make sure that as you're coaching and practicing, that's fulfilling for you as well in a way that resonates with your values.